distintas deputadas, senhores e senhores, espero que tenham os auscultadores. Eu vou me comunicar em português e não em inglês.
I hope you have your earphones. I will be communicating in Portuguese. My name is Maria Angelina Dikanak. I am a parliamentarian, or a Mozambican parliamentarian. It is an honor to proceed in presenting this document in regards to a woman that is very regarded to be strong. She is a fighter for a woman cause, and this woman has a very undoubtful curriculum, and she is called Mukateko Joyce Malukleke. She is a general director from a woman department, youth, and people with deficient since 2020. But as you can see, she acquires a lot of experience, especially in different areas. To name a few of those areas, we have leadership, strategy, and 20 years experience. Joyce Malulek is an advocate at High Court in South Africa. She's a member of Advocate Associate in Johannesburg. She has a master, bachelor, as well as postgraduate in constitutional analysis. She is human rights as well as equality and non-discrimination justice or administrative justice, as well as development of rights and dissolvents practice. The mining law, strategic planning, scenario planning, the management of operation and programs, the management of leadership and development, leadership of women, as well as you can see, she is a very accomplished and dedicated activist, and operates in various areas within decades or more. This is a great presenter, a woman that will bring about to all of us and share an experience that we can take upon to our own people. And who knows, with our leadership can actually assist our activity. Hence, we can take advantage of that and teach our own people. I would like to invite Dr. Joyce to come to the podium. I thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Program Director. All those things are on paper. What's important is, do you use them or not? All the qualifications that people always narrate, sometimes they're just qualifications, but how do we use that qualification to be able to improve our countries? Another Program Director, thank you. Honorable Speaker, in her absence, all ministers and deputy ministers, all speakers from other countries, allow me, program directors, to follow the protocol that has already been established so that I don't leave anyone out. I thank you for the opportunity to participate in this August event, the P20 panel discussion on gender mainstreaming in disaster resilience and responses. I am so wowed by Parliament choosing this topic, members of Parliament or the P20 choosing this topic, because most of the time gender mainstreaming is a topic that is right at the end, and yet it's supposed to be the most important topic. Indeed, as President Ramaphosa said in his remarks when he launched South Africa's G20 presidency on the 3rd of December 2024, that climate change crisis is worsening across the world. The other thing that he said was that billions of people are affected by underdevelopment, inequality, poverty, hunger, and unemployment, the factors that are exploited by climate change. Minister in the Presidency for Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, Minister Sindisiwe Chikunga, had already indicated that we, in our G20, the Empowerment of Women Working Group, we had decided on 3 themes, which is policy perspective on care, economy, both paid and unpaid care work, and household and family responsibilities, because those are some of the factors that make women to be at home and not even be able to attend the capacity building classes or whatever activities that exist in order for them to be resilient to climate change. Financial inclusion of and for women. This is critical because it depends where you buy a house. Where you are on top of the mountain and you won't be affected by the floods, or right next to where the floods are going to be. So our topics, even though we didn't focus on climate change itself, but they have a bearing. We also have looked at addressing the scourge of gender-based violence and femicide. Also, as a department in our G20, as a technical working group, we have analyzed all the other working groups' concept documents to look at whether they have mainstreamed women, youth, and persons with disabilities or not. At the time when we analyzed all the working groups' concept documents, none of them had mainstream women, youth, and persons with disabilities. However, throughout the year, they made sure that they would host site events that would focus specifically on their topic and women. Whether they're looking at climate change or they're looking at education or whatever that they were looking at, they will make sure that they mainstream women, youth, and persons with disabilities. Women and girls in all their diversity, and I specifically mention in all their diversity because as a department, we're also responsible for disability, persons with disabilities. So women with disabilities are even more vulnerable. Women and girls in all their diversity across the globe, including in South Africa, are the most vulnerable to the impact of climate change and its disasters. Besides what we see on television across the world, just this past week, the most devastating tornadoes ripping across Hong Kong, China, and other areas in the region, including disasters, floods in Pakistan and India, and life-shattering earthquakes in Afghanistan and Nepal. We here in South Africa have also seen it here at home. KwaZulu-Natal, including disasters, floods in Pakistan and India, and life-shattering earthquakes in Afghanistan and Nepal. We here in South Africa have also seen it here at home. KwaZulu-Natal, greatest brand, and disproportionate inequalities. Disability is another factor, as I had already indicated, which is not always considered and not included in the reports. As a department, as I had already indicated, which is not always considered and not included in the reports. As a department, took a study on the impact of climate change on persons with disabilities, investigating the intersection of climate change and disability in South Africa. The report highlights the disproportionate vulnerabilities persons with disabilities face during climate impacts, while also recognizing their resilience, coping mechanisms, and contributions to community responses. Persons with disabilities experience heightened risks during climate events due to physical, social, economic, and institutional barriers. In poverty-stricken areas, the roads are not even responsive to people who are on wheelchair. They can't push the wheelchair on the road. You go to Alexander, here people have built shacks on the pavement, so persons with disabilities cannot be able to navigate in those areas. The report also makes recommendations to make persons with disabilities resilient to disasters, but also how government can be able to do that. So what is gender mainstreaming in disaster resilience and response? Gender mainstreaming in disaster resilience and response is the process of integrating the different needs, roles, and experiences of women and men in all their diversity, because even men, there are men with disabilities, into all aspects of disaster risks reduction, preparedness, response, and recovery. It recognizes that disasters disproportionately affect women and girls due to their social, cultural, and economic factors leading to higher vulnerabilities. By adopting a gender-responsive approach, efforts can be made more effective, inclusive, and equitable, ensuring that no one is left behind and leveraging the unique experiences and capacities women bring. It is therefore critical to align with the mainstreaming into international frameworks and agreements on climate change, risk mitigation, and adaptation strategies. The Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction of 2015 to 2030 is the UN framework, which most of us are signatories to, promotes inclusive approaches to disaster risk management and inclusion. It was preceded by the Hyogo Framework for Action from 2005 to 2015. I'm mentioning them because one just has to look at all government departments. Most government departments have ratified it since 2005. This year is 2025. In the past 20 years, how have we involved women in coming up with responses to be able to respond to disasters? And I know we're focusing on climate change, but disasters is not just climate change. There are many disasters that are affecting women. How have we done? Why are we going to the UN? Why are we going to the UN every year to meet? Are we just meeting? Is it a high tea? Or are we going there to make sure that when we come back to our countries, we implement what has been agreed, we implement the best practices that we have seen in other countries? So what's important is how to implement gender mainstreaming. Most countries, now I'm referring to the developing countries, the developed countries do have data collection mechanisms. However, even the developed countries are affected by climate change. Let me just give an example. I was in New York some other time, and when I was in New York, in Washington, there was this wind that was blowing cars. Cars were blown in the streets. And I was thinking, I'm not far away from Washington. So I thought, it's the most developed country, but they also experience climate change. So no one is safe from climate change. But how do we make sure that our people are safe, and more especially women, youth, and persons with disabilities, and children? I'll always refer to women, youth, and persons with disabilities because it's the mandate of my department, but children are also included. You can't talk women and not talk children. So in the developing countries, we do not have in most instances, mechanisms to be able to collect data. We do not have data. Or even if we have data, we have disaggregated data. We don't have disaggregated data. If you don't have disaggregated data, you can't tell how many women are affected or how many women are poor. You can't prepare to be able to say, if we have to evacuate, how are we going to be able to evacuate women, youth, persons with disabilities who need wheelchairs? Yes, there are countries who have information. There are countries who tell you that we can tell from cradle to grave in terms of where are persons with disabilities. In some of our countries, we cannot. But I think we can make an effort in order for us to be able to start collecting that information. Inclusive planning. Government departments must make sure that, or even countries beyond government departments, to make sure that it's a deliberate effort to bring in women. It doesn't depend on who is employed, because sometimes women are excluded because they are not in leadership positions or they are not employed in those departments. If they're not in departments, get civil society organizations to come and participate, or experts out there or from the universities to come and make inputs into the policy or the strategy that is being developed. And I would like to indicate that there's no government that doesn't have women. So one might not even have to go to universities, but you have to include universities and civil society and the communities, the ordinary communities. Capacity building, empower women by providing training and resources for leadership roles and participation in community-based risk, disaster risk management. Resource allocation. I'll make an example with our department. I know that KSA also is now implementing gender responsive budgeting. We have established a framework. We call it gender responsive planning, budgeting, monitoring, evaluation, and evaluation framework, because we developed a framework where we are saying everyone, if we are in the Department of Planning, we have a planning department, Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, and they have a planning commission. We are saying mainstream gender, whatever you are planning. If you're planning 30 years of strategy for the country, make sure you mainstream women. If we are budgeting, let the National Treasury mainstream women, youth, and persons with disabilities. Let those that are doing monitoring and evaluation mainstream in the frame, in the monitoring framework. Let the mainstream women, youth, and persons with disabilities. Even auditing, our Auditor General has started auditing government departments, even though it started with few government departments, but it has started auditing whether government departments are implementing the GRPBMEA. So it assists governments to be able to plan appropriately or responsively in terms of gender responsive budgeting, in terms of responding to climate change. Promoting leadership. Women and men, it's given. We look at things differently. We look at responses also with the mind of everybody, not just our children, but the entire community. So when you bring in women, they're able to bring in aspects that no one else could have thought about it. Women would know that there are people who are frail. I'm not saying men wouldn't know, but I'm just saying when you bring women, because they are the caregivers, they'll be able to bring everyone that they've been caring for. Addressing barriers. This is the most pressing issue that all government, or all countries, or all parliaments need to look at. Focus on culturally sensitive and inclusive approaches to overcome cultural norms and gender-related barriers that hinder participation of women. And gender-based violence and femicide also is a challenge. Sometimes women are not able to participate because they are afraid for whatever the repercussions of them being involved. What have we done on women, climate change, women and climate change in South Africa? As a department, the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, we try to work with all government departments in order to empower them to be able to mainstream women, youth and persons with disabilities, or mainstream gender in everything that they do. The Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment is the one that is responsible for the strategy for climate change. So we worked with them. That's what we do as a department. So the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment, and the South African National Biodiversity Institution co-hosts a climate change adaptation and gender mainstreaming dialogue on an annual basis since 2023. Its purpose is to provide a platform to continuously advocate for the inclusion of women, young women, women and girls with disabilities and others in climate change and adaptation solutions. The outcome of the dialogue was to establish a community of practice on resilience and adaptation, as well as gender mainstreaming, made up of stakeholders such as experts, policymakers, women in all their diversities and from all over all walks of life, which will still be operational beyond the hosting of the dialogues. Involvement in policy work and climate change and the environment. What we've done with regard to this, we participated in the climate change gender action plan. We assisted DFFE to develop a plan and to make sure that it has mainstreamed women, youth, and persons with disabilities from a gender dimension. We also participated in or assisted the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment when they were writing their 4th National Communication Report to UNFCCC, was that the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which presents information about the implementation of climate change in policies in the country. Also, what we have done, we have participated in integrating indicators of women, youth, and persons with disabilities into the global biodiversity framework by the Department of Forestry, Fisheries, and Environment. The challenge that we realize, not just the South Africa, I think all countries, is that the area of work in Scotland, it was reported that all the delegates present, women only made up 26% of the delegation. Yet women make up approximately half of the population in any world and are the most vulnerable to climate change and natural disasters as a result of climate change. So women must be part and parcel of the COP26. Women must be part and parcel of the decision making, but also of determining what is required. We have collaborated as a department, as a country also, with UNIDO in undertaking research study on policy assessment on gender in the green economy, because all of us have to promote the green economy in order to mitigate the climate change. And also developed a gender mainstreaming in the green economy training toolkit, which we have workshopped officials in the relevant departments. Further, our cabinet, as I already indicated, that they've approved the gender responsive planning, budgeting, monitoring and evaluation and auditing framework, which we make sure that everyone in the country will continue training people. And our parliament, our portfolio committee, last year when they were doing now I'm hanging the dirty linen. When they were orientating the MPs, we were on the program to orientate the new members on the GRPB, and we're taken out. So we're still waiting. We're hoping that we'll be able to orientate the parliamentarians on gender responsive budgeting. But also we've collaborated with the government of Canada to develop a training program on gender-based analysis. This training program, it aims not just to train government, but everyone in South Africa, private sector, communities. It's an online training program, and we are grateful. I saw the government of Canada somewhere. We're grateful that they helped us to be able to do that. I think what's important is that we need to ensure inclusivity and inclusiveness. And I know everybody knows, but just for a matter of emphasis, the difference between the two is that inclusivity refers to the active practice, policy, or state of intentionally including all types of people, while inclusiveness is the outcome. So let's make sure that we look at both. How do we remain inclusive, ensuring inclusivity, and making sure that we achieve inclusiveness. This inclusive foundation allows for more equitable access to resources and participation in decision-making, crucial for navigating complex situations and building sustainable adaptive capacity. Building resilience means practicing actions and thoughts that help you work through these setbacks in a positive way. Resilience is the ability to bounce back and adapt to difficult situations. I think as many countries, as we know what our countries are doing, we have not yet attained that ability for everyone to be able to be resilient. It has been said about South Africa, we still have people who are still in shelters because they've not yet been restored after the disasters that we've had. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Advocate. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, and all other protocol observed. And thank you to my co-chair, Her Excellency from Mozambique, Ms. Enoch, for chairing this session with me. And allow me to say thank you to the Advocate from this department for your overview. You've given us a lot of food for thought. And before we carry on with this session, allow me to introduce myself. I am a Member of Parliament. I serve in the second House of Parliament, as I would like to refer to it as the upper house, but my esteemed colleague sitting next to me would argue with that, Honourable van der Merwe. But nevertheless, and I'm also the chair of the cluster in the Select Committee known as the Economic Development and Trade Cluster. Before we hand over to the floor for the questions that are going to be posed to you, Advocate, I hope you're ready for all the questions. I would just like to alert you to a slight change in this session. Spain has indicated that they are now able to provide their statement, their country statement. So we're going to allow them after the question session to do that. And then when Spain has done their question session, we will ask the delegate from Russia, the rapporteur, to come up and summarize and give us an overview of all the questions that have been asked. If I may, just speak to what has transpired this morning. We've heard from the majority of speakers here today that the time for talk is over. It's action that is needed now. We cannot go forward any longer with talk. And I am asking every person representing their countries to join us in this very important action that has to be taken to ensure that our women, our children, our youth are looked after. And as the advocate quite rightly said, women with disabilities in South Africa are the ones that are suffering the most at this point in time. We've just received an alert of a possible weather storms with excessive rains in 6 of our 9 provinces. So we might again be seeing something that transpired in 2022 in KZN. And that is why it is so important to speak to this issue, to see how we take hands and assist those less fortunate than ourselves. As we also heard today, disasters are not gender neutral. In rural areas, especially, climate change forces women to work further for water, for firewood, and this is the reason of the deepening poverty and leaving less time for education. Because many of our girl learners are the backbone of a family. Many of them are house siblings. They have to ensure that the siblings get to school. They have to ensure that there's food on the table. So we need for them to be able to see that the delegation at this P20 is reaching out to them. And then we must remember when crops fail or floods strike, they face food insecurity, health risks, and heightened vulnerability to the big question on the table, gender-based violence. And in saying that, we as parliamentarians have no option. We must legislate and budget for these policies to ensure no one is left behind when disaster strikes. And in saying that, if I could ask my co-chair if she would like to chair this session with the questions. The questions are going to be directed to Advocate Maluleka, so I'd like to ask her to come to the floor, and I'm asking you to also come to the front, Your Excellency, so that we can assist Advocate Maluleka with the questions that could emanate from the floor. So the floor is now open, so if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to ask. And if there are no questions, I've got quite a few questions that I would like to ask the floor. Thank you.
Muito obrigada. As duas apresentadoras foi uma apresentação tão clara, tão nítida
very clear
dos problemas
presentations
que nós
on the challenges that we are faced with daily in our countries. Dr. Joyce articulated very well the nexus between poverty and hunger faced by women. We as parliamentarians, we should advocate for some legislation in order to alleviate the suffering of these ladies. She also referred to climate changes, and she also mentioned that these disasters not only occur in Africa but across the world, and mostly they affect women. She also touched on what is happening in Soweto, Alexandra. She also mentioned people with disability, but not only women and children, but also people with disability who also suffer from these natural disasters. And she highlighted on the need to plan budget properly in order for us to fight against these disasters. But we should also use our students to help us in developing these plans in order to carry out these plans and our objective towards alleviating our women and children from these situations. Dr. Advocate, Dr. I can't recall your name. I can't remember your name. Yes, please. Your name. Your name. Your name.
Sorry, if I may ask, people that would like to ask questions, if they just hold up their name plates so that we can identify from which country.
Ótimo, obrigada. Eu ia mesmo para lá.
Thank you. I was actually going to touch on that before inviting her, but I would like to open the floor for any country interested in taking the floor following these two presentations. The floor is open. South Africa.
Não se vê muito bem a placa.
What's that one?
You know displayed.
Thank you very much. I am Karabotebo Khomagagane from the Northwest Provincial Legislature. My question is going to be based on AI, the impact of AI. As they say, it can be incredibly expensive to be poor. So now what my question is aligned to is the tendency of machine learning bias in finance, which actually impact on climate change adaptation, budgeting, and the technological adaptation. On top of it, when we come to the Green Technology Toolkit, has this been adapted to big language and the use of artificial intelligence? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. I'm going to take 3 questions, and then we're going to afford Advocate Malaleka to respond to them, and then we'll take questions again. Before I go to South Africa, I think we're going to give our guests the opportunity first to ask. And could I ask Argentina, or was it Australia? Australia, thank you.
Thank you. I thought your comment about data and the lack of disaggregated data in working on solutions and getting information about what was needed was really interesting. And I'm just wondering what advances you've made, and to also report that Australia, as a Commonwealth with independent states, also has issues around the collection of data. The data is there, but it's hard to get it from states who have their own laws and ways of doing things. So I'm wondering what advances you might have made in the disaggregated data. But I thought it was a really interesting point that you made.
Thank you very much for that. In the absence, the United Kingdom, thank you.
Thank you, and it was a very interesting presentation. I have a question about how government can effectively work with civil society organisations, because so often they are more trusted in communities, and particularly communities that historically have not been engaged with authority and with government. So how can governments forge those relationships with civil society organisations in order to get to more vulnerable populations with information and indeed feedback about disaster planning? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any of our guests, so could I hand over to South Africa? Thank you.
No, thank you, Chair. It's a question which we were all supposed to, including myself, to talk about or to reflect on. None of us have reflected on a challenging issue. Maybe other countries don't have it. A challenging issue of child-headed homes. For some of those are young women who are then product of child-headed homes, not because of their own making. We will understand the challenge of HIV and AIDS at the time. Others were 13 when they lost their children. I just want to check with if Advocate Moleleka can be able to say, what is it that is to be done? And I bet my life for a penny, even the youth section is not going to be talking about that. It's something that is very, very important. And as the country, we're a bit silent. Maybe other countries have an experience of that, and what can we learn from that? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. All right, I see one more hand up. Can we go for that, Advocate? You quite all right? The lady over there, if you could just give us your name and then we'll take your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Susan Tembekwayo, South Africa. I've got two questions based on gender-responsive budgeting. The equal or fair distribution of resources, including the transparency in all the process. So the first question would be, how can gender-responsive budgeting ensure that resources are distributed fairly and equally, considering the diverse needs of every person included or considered? And then the second question, based on transparency, how can gender-responsive budgeting increase transparency, which can enable citizens to hold the governments accountable for gender equality commitments? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Advocate, are you ready to respond? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the questions that have been asked. The impact of artificial intelligence. I think when you talk about artificial intelligence, there are always positives and negatives. But the positives are more most of the time. For example, countries that have developed their AI, they are able to detect climate change and warn people on time. So I would like to focus on that. I don't want to focus on the negatives because most of the time people will tell you about the negatives. But if you have established proper mechanisms, we are able to warn people on time that there's going to be a problem. We are able to evacuate people on time. Machine learning, when you talk machine learning, it's about the AI. It's about how AI functions, so you can't separate the two. And as I said, that I do not want to focus on the bias part of it. Yes, it's expensive for the developing countries. We are not able to implement it, but I think there are ways that we can be able to come up with mechanisms of ensuring that we also participate in that. I will share with it. There's a question we said, what did you do? And the green technology language. There are women now who we met with them in one of the conferences where they said to us, they own farms. They have these huge farms, and they were saying, no, we no longer go into the farms. We just, they've put some technological, whatever, AIs within the green, they call them green technology. It's able to tell them what's happening in the farm, whether things are ripe or not. But at the same time, it's very expensive. Not everyone is able to do that. Actually, some of the women that are farming will tell you that we have to pay a lot of money to the farmers that have been established long ago in order for them to come and either test certain things in the farms. So there is that bias that it's very expensive, but at the same time, it can be very beneficial because you can be able to detect and be able to warn people on time because of the AI. Data lack and lack of disaggregated data. Yes, I think data is regulated, but however, within government itself, where I can be able to get information from any government departments because it's our role to monitor government departments. But the data that you get is disaggregated in most instances. So if it's disaggregated, it doesn't tell you how many people with disabilities. It doesn't tell you how many children are born with disabilities. It doesn't tell you so much that you can't do anything with that information. So in order for any country to be able to plan, it needs disaggregated data that will tell you, not just in terms of gender, in terms of race, in terms of location, in terms of many other age and other things. So you are able to say young persons can run, but elderly people can't run. So we have to start with them. We have to put mechanisms that will help them to be able to respond quickly. In terms of advances, as a department, I think all of us know that in all countries, when you talk about gender units or ministries that are responsible for women, youth, and persons with disabilities, they are underfunded. However, as a department, we are going to be one of the most automated or digitalized departments because we approached a private sector and said to them, we do not have money to automate our services. Can you automate? And fortunately, they agreed. We are working on it. We're automating everything. So we believe that other government departments will plug into our department. So in that way, we will be able to ensure that in the future, we'll kickstart the process of capturing or collecting data that is disaggregated. So we're working on that. And as you've said, it is regulated. In some instances, you can't get information because we have a privacy bill where you can't get information about people. But collecting disaggregated data is not about an individual. It's about being able to respond to the needs of all the people. So it is a tool that would empower even the individuals. How does government work with civil society? In South Africa, I think we are fortunate. We work with civil society, and civil society is able to demand that they work with us. Civil society is able to go to court and say, this, even Parliament, to say Parliament didn't consult us on this bill, and the court will definitely declare the process to be unconstitutional or irregular or whatever. However, our civil society want to work with us, whether it be in gender-based violence or in any aspect. We have different sectors. We have civil society in different sectors, whether it's those that are in climate change or those that are in gender-based violence or any aspect. They work with government. We work together. So it's a policy or it's a practice that as government we have established. So it's easier for us to work with them. Even though, yes, the issue of the trust, they still sometimes don't trust government, but we work together. Child-headed families, it is a problem for us in South Africa. Now, during COVID, many parents were dying and leaving children behind. Even before then, HIV and all those others, we have a challenge with a family-headed, child-headed families. However, in South Africa, we have a department called the Department of Social Development, which is solely responsible. Yes, there's education, there's all the others, but its role is to make sure that it looks at families. So they do look after them, but I think the question, the specific question is the involvement of those child-headed families to respond to responses or to develop policies and response mechanisms to climate change. I think it's a very good question. We will ask the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment in future in terms of how did they involve children. The problem with our department is that it's women, youth and persons with disabilities. So youth, most of the time we make sure that they get involved, but we wouldn't know how deep they are involved in development of policy in DFFE. However, in all other aspects, we do consult with youth, and South Africa has established these mechanisms. Every province, we have 9 provinces, every province in the Premier's office, there's an office of women, OSW, office on the status of women, office on the status of youth, office on the status of persons with disabilities. So when we consult, they consult in their provinces and then also bring whatever the consultation. So we do have a mechanism or infrastructure to be able to consult with women, youth, and persons with disabilities. On fair distribution, on or the impact of the gender responsive planning, budgeting, monitoring, evaluation and auditing framework, is that the National Treasury has now developed guidelines on gender responsive budgeting. They've developed a framework. However, we're still struggling with them because their focus now is looking at government departments, how much did you spend on women, whatever. But we want the process to start from National Treasury, where they would look at government departments when they ask for a budget, to look at how do they disaggregate. When they ask for a budget, have they already shown in their budget request in terms of the disaggregation, in terms of gender, women and all the others, but also in expenditure, because also that's the other thing that we've realized, that people will put what you want in the plan, but in terms of implementation, they're able to divert the money in order for them to use it for something else. And hence, I spoke about gender-based analysis, that the framework we've developed with Canada, so that everyone can be trained. Once people have been trained and they know how to do the analysis, the gender analysis, they will be able to mainstream women, youth, and persons with disabilities. Yeah, I think I've responded to all the questions. Thank you.
If I may just ask you, did you speak to Transparency House of the budget?
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. How the budget can be made transparent. From 2024, National Treasury, because of this gender responsive budgeting framework that they've developed, now they'll be making a gender statement every year. When they go for the budget vote, they'll also be making a gender statement in terms of gender budgeting statement, showing how much has the country spent on women. But also our budget is advertised, so everyone can see, anyone can analyze it and indicate whether they comply or not. It's transparent. However, transparency doesn't necessarily mean that it is responsive, but the processes are transparent, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is responsive. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. I think she does deserve another round of applause because her responses were very good. Thank you, Advocate. Are there any other questions from the floor? 1, 2, Honourable Manyanishu, over to you.
Thank you, co-chairpersons, and good afternoon, honorable members. I think one would want to make a follow-up comment with regards to what has been said by Honorable Dunjwa, to say in this platform, let us note that we have young women or women who are child-headed families. And as we speak about vulnerable people and excluded women, we need to as well define them
based on their socio-economic challenges. So I think it's something that we were not actually to need to question it, but to comment to say that there's a need of identifying and acknowledging that there's a type of women who are actually having some burdens because of socio-economic issues, or as well having to be raising of OVC, like your vulnerable children in their household. So we need to ensure that as we speak these developments and equalities, we must take them along as well with their speciality based on the socio-economic status. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. There's nothing to respond to because it was more of a comment, and I'm sure that the powers that be will take this up and look into it seriously. All right. I think that was the last question, but I would like to pose some questions to the floor, and anybody is more than welcome to respond. If I may, now this morning and this afternoon, we've heard how climate change and disasters affect rural women disproportionately. What examples have you seen in your own communities or countries where this has been especially visible? Must I repeat that? The gentleman from Turkey, must I repeat it? All right. We've heard how climate change and disasters affect rural women. What examples have you seen in your country and implemented in your communities where this has been especially visible? South Africa being a very rural country, I mean, the majority of our provinces are rural orientated, and the majority of people, because of the old dispensation, were moved out of the urban areas to very rural areas, and they are being affected by climate change. So if you have any examples that you can share with us, it would be great. And then from your perspective, any one of the countries here, what is the single most pressing gender-related challenge in disaster resilience right now? And then my final question is, what are the biggest barriers preventing the adoption of gender-sensitive policies in disaster planning and response? I don't know if my co-chair has any questions. If not, I'm not asking for a response, but it would be great to hear your views if you also have rural areas that can be shared with us all in this House. Honourable Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I do think that besides answering the questions you've posed, I also think it's important that countries make comments, even not necessarily questions specifically related to Advocate Maluleke, but also if they have specific comments on issues regarding the topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a very important statement made by our Deputy Speaker. Is any country prepared, or is it pressing for them to give us any comments on the issues on the table currently?
Maybe I can say there is no any special or different thing in Turkey except the different from the other countries. The climate change affect all the world. There is no differences for Turkey. But maybe I can add or I can give some information about Turkey. As you know, my country experienced the earthquakes on February 6, 2023. I mean, we place particular emphasis on ensuring equality between men and women in disaster management processes, in initiatives such as the National Earthquake Strategy and Action Plan developed by Disaster and Emergency Management Presidency and the Turkey Post-Disaster Recovery. And I can share maybe one more thing. After these earthquakes, and we immediately assessed the strengthened the capacity of violence prevention and monitoring centers and women's shelters in the affected provinces. We've taken measures. Thousands of women and children received protective, educational, and empowerment services. And building on these efforts under IPA2, we aim to further enhance the capacity of preventive and protective services for violence against women and the affected areas. We must act with a perspective that ensures women's full participation in decision making and policy making processes without viewing them solely as disaster victims. Maybe I can add this, but there is no any special study about how climate change affected the women about this issue.
Thank you very much for that. I'm just going to hand over to my co-chair if she would like to respond. I have got a response, but I would like to give her an opportunity.
Obrigada. Tenho uma senhora antes de fazer algum comentário.
Do you have a question? I saw a lady that has. Do you have something to say before I give my comments or answer?
Thank you so much. Ms. Raghani, the Deputy Speaker of the UK Parliament. You posed a number of questions from the stage, and one of the questions, what is the singular biggest challenge that we face when we're dealing with women in disaster or managing disasters? And I would say that the singular challenge that we all face is that when we are able to end up in leadership positions, when a disaster does take place, that women are very rarely in the room when strategies are put in place, when policies are put in place, or fundamentally when budgets are being allocated to relieve a community or a country of a disaster. And so women, once again, are at highest risk. I'm just reflecting on a paper by the UNDRR that makes it very clear that when disasters affect nations, they primarily affect women and girls, disproportionately affect women and girls. And unfortunately, when decisions are being taken around disasters, women and girls are excluded from that decision-making process. So I suppose my learning would be before I became a Member of Parliament, I worked in Afghanistan. Whilst being a Member of Parliament, I've worked with countries who've been impacted by climate change issues in particular, that we need to make sure we are doing everything that we can to ensure that female voices are heard when decisions are being taken either on a nation or international level, that women are most definitely heard. They will understand better what can be done at a local community network level. They can understand what the local knowledge, how that can impact any budget being allocated, and obviously what's needed to be done to ensure that community not only survives but thrives going forward. If I can quickly reflect on the speaker just before me who was talking about the double role that women play, I'm reflecting on what took place in the UK during and post-COVID. Now, uniquely, women had a role in not only being nurturers of their children and educators, but also being carers for their families, their parents, and their communities. And unless those women's voices were heard in our COVID management programme, we would have been even more adversely affected by COVID, our economy, sociologically as well, if we'd not had women at the table making those decisions. So we need to understand the role of women, understand their role within their communities, within their families and their economy. But I would argue the only way we can elevate women in these decision-making processes is if we can come forward with absolute data to show the evidence that having women at this table just enables countries to get back on track much faster than what they are at the moment. So one of, I suppose, my arguments for today would be how can we do better in sharing that data? And how can we ensure that data is robust and thorough enough to be challenged, and we can then evidence that it matters to have the right women at the right table at the right time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that. I couldn't agree more. But our women should not just be heard. We must take it a step further. We must show them that we've heard what they say, and we must implement their requests. But time after time, we are just listening, but we're not actually doing something. So again, I'm requesting that our time for talk must really come to an end. It's good to talk, but the action now has to be put into force so that we can show the most vulnerable that we are here for them. Are there any more questions from the floor? I don't see any hands. Do you, Co-Chair? If you could just check. Okay. Seeing that there are no more questions, could I ask the delegate from Spain to come to the podium to deliver their country's statement as requested? Thank you.
Good afternoon. I will speak in Spanish. Thank you. Soy Francina.
I am Francina Armengol Socias, Speaker of the Chamber of Deputies of Spain. I should have spoken first with other countries, but we didn't have interpreting. What I would like to say first is that for me it's an immense pleasure to be with you here in this second meeting of Women Parliamentarians of the P20. I am sure that this will be a space in which we will find ways of collaboration to follow this path, this hard path of gender equality, and giving this perspective of women to all spheres of decision-making. It is a continuous task in varying degrees all over the world. In Spain, I'm proud to say that we have passed last year a law that gives women a minimum percentage of 40% of representation in decision-making bodies in large companies. We are making progress, no doubt, but we are far from attaining our objective. We women are still victims of discrimination of all kinds, and like the entire world. In Spain, we don't have to go further. 28 women have been killed alone in this year by their partners or ex-partners. The salary gap persists, and caregiving work is still the work of mostly women. But we are convinced that in Spain and all over that must change. Mainstreaming of gender perspective and women is critical, and it's a need that answers the issue, the absolutely essential issue of human rights and equality. Of course, however, the more we still do not consider this as a valid argument, I would say that women in decision making will be a strategy and a success in strategy. When evaluating a success in strategy, when evaluating perspectives are, the more options we have to find solutions to eradicate it. If those perspectives are women's, the experts tell us that women participation is essential to turn our response to disasters more efficient, so that we can face a climate hostile future, a future over which an aggressive tension looms and which threatens the uncertainty and that threatens all of us. Uncertainty cannot be the compass of our peoples. I want to send our support to the women of Palestine. More than 20,000 children have been killed in Gaza. They die in their mothers' arms, and there is no other worse horror as this one in the world. History will not forgive us for having allowed it. And we know that in a calamity environment of this magnitude, women will bear the biggest brunt. A study of UN Habitat about disasters found that women and girls are more likely to die due to gender disparity and social and economic inequalities. They suffer the most and they die the most. The participation of women in general and the parliamentarians in particular is essential. Historically, they have always carried the biggest weight when it comes to caregiving, and they will also have the biggest weight in situations of catastrophes and crisis due to disasters. We know what it is to carry that on our shoulders, and we also know that it is a responsibility that we should not ignore. For that, we need that our voices and all the women are listened to. It's our responsibility to create an environment where the participation of women is possible, that facilitates the participation of women, and with regard to resilience in case of disasters and their response programs. I thank you again for the invitation. It will be a pleasure to listen to your contributions and to share this summit of the P20 with reflections and debates on how to work with multilateralism and with our parliaments to improve the conditions, the life conditions of women. I am sure that together we'll go on fighting for the rights of everyone, for the rights of every one of us. Thank you to the chairmanship of P20, and thank you to all the parliamentarians.
Thank you very much to the delegate from Spain. Unfortunately, I couldn't follow because my battery was flat. Ladies and gentlemen, guests, before I call on the rapporteur from Russia, let us leave this room today with a commitment to ensure that when the next disaster strikes, no woman, no child, and no community is left behind. Before I call on the delegate from Russia to report on the proceedings of this session, could I just hand the mic over to my co-chair for her closing remarks? Thank you.
Muito obrigada, colega. Obrigada.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Thank you very much, the parliamentarians thank you very much for the contribution and the sharing of the experience from various countries. Together, we will find a way, we will find the solution. And I would like to thank everyone. I would like to apologize for the inconvenience. De facto language sometimes become an obstacle, like our colleague just mentioned, that she could not carry out her presentation or her report because there was no interpretation. We need to assure that we both contribute and we both help each other and assure that all languages are available to assure that we are able to understand each other and work. I thank my colleague, my co-chair, for the patience and for the communication in regards to this very, very important team for women and for youth in general. So I will call upon Russia to carry out or to carry on with the next item in the agenda. Thank you, and applause to every one of us.
Obrigado, Your Excellency. Could I please call upon the delegate from Russia to sum up? Thank you very much.
Hello, my dear friends, my dear colleagues. First of all, I would like to greet you, women, my strong and professional colleagues. And I'm really glad and grateful to be a part of our today's very important meeting. But as I represent Russia, I will speak Russian. В повестке G20, как ведущего форума глобального управления, вопросы женского лидерства.
So, G20 agenda is a leading forum of global issues, including female leadership and entrepreneurship issues. It takes a considerable place in the world. The topic is considered both as an independent track and in connection with economic growth stimulation, innovation development, and providing employment. So the working group on female empowerment is active on a regular basis. This platform was set by Indian chairmanship in 2023. This is a clue ground dedicated to this problem. So Women 20 is one of the formats that has been uniting non-governmental unions since 2015. In G20, Russia is standing firm in terms of branches Russia approaches. It orients at priorities marked in National Strategy of Female-Oriented Activity in 2023-2030. Our efforts of Russia and like-minders, firstly from Global South, are aimed at working out efficient and well-balanced profile agreements. What is the obstacle? Neoliberal Western elites are blurring female agenda on purpose via extending explanation of gender factor with a focus on LGBT policy. Together with partners, we are against distorted interpretations and shifting a focus from the tasks of full-time and involvement of women into business life. 2025, South Africa chairs G20. And, dear country, it's your first experience in the work of the forum. Pretoria pays a lot of attention to the struggle of gender inequality. And this solution is not just about local specifics, but also about 30th of Jubilee of Beijing Declaration and Activity Platform. Discussion focus is on South Africa issues of female self-realization fulfillment, including the mechanisms of taking internationally important decisions. It is not a new topic for G20. It is the call for actions G20 taken in 2024 within a summit week of UNO General Assembly level. So this year, G20 is summarizing multi-year of fulfilling Brisbane aim. It is about decreasing the so-called gap difference in female representation on a labor market, and now it is 25%. According to the International Labour Organization, about 12 members of the forum, including the Russian Federation, are able to demonstrate the results. So currently, we are meeting a new indicator with a horizon up to 2030, and it is going to involve 100 million more females into economics. So the meeting of women parliamentaries and young parliamentaries on the line of G20 enable to discuss multi-aspects of a creative role of women and young people. So according to IPU, the number of parliamentary women has reached 26.9%. In parliaments of Commonwealth of Independent States, these are the states of former Soviet Union, females make up from 16 to 40% of authority corpus. They are bright and experienced politicians that head the parliaments of Azerbaijan, Belarus, Russia, and Uzbekistan. So dialogue of our women and youth are an efficient mechanism, and the efficiency of work and high feedback concerning the female agenda is vividly demonstrated by Eurasian Female Forum, NEVA International Ecological Congress, St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, Eastern Economic Forum. And this is a global platform for advancing female entrepreneurship that is quite actively developing in the framework of Female Business Alliance, BRICS. So we have to understand the efficient stimuli for self-realization of women, both politically and economically, and speaking about entrepreneurship. We find it totally unacceptable that some countries sanction, for some ideological and political reasons, representatives, they make artificial obstacles for their participation in implementation of international discussions. Thank you.
Thank you to the two co-chairs. We appreciate your involvement today, and also, as was said, all the speakers for the questions, the comments, and I can also just reiterate that we have to leave here and take things into action and not only words. This is what we have to do. Honourable ladies, gentlemen, guests, we will now just have a 5-minute comfort break, and then we will proceed with the second session. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, honorable members. My name is Mapule Dlamini from South Africa. I'll be chairing this session with my colleague here, whom I'm going to introduce her when I give her an opportunity to come and talk to you. The session that we are going to chair is Women and Finance for a Just Energy Transition. And why this topic? Gender inclusion must drive the just energy transition. The clean energy is an opportunity to advance gender equality and social inclusion. However, policies must be grounded in the lived reality of women and underrepresented groups. As the global clean energy transition gains momentum, one principle becomes increasingly clear: that we cannot talk about equality without addressing gender. Women and underrepresented groups are most amongst the vulnerable to climate change and tend to face higher rates of energy poverty. As economies and communities around the globe, the transition away from fossil fuels, marginalized groups could be disproportionately impacted if governments depend on top-down policy making decisions and overlook lived realities. Therefore, this is so important. From this morning, we've been talking to challenges and some of the solutions that as the G20 member state countries, we want to champion. And I think it is at this point in time, we must be, as G20 member state countries, as solution-driven countries, to be at the forefront of ensuring that we implement and we walk the talk. Without wasting any time, let me hand over to my co-chair from Mauritius, Honorable M.R. Colette, who's going to take us through this session. I'll come later. Over to you, Honorable Colette.
Thank you, Honorable Dlamini. Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues and esteemed guests. Welcome to this crucial session on women and finance for a just energy transition, which I will call JET. This afternoon, we stand at crossroads. The global energy transition is not just about kilowatts and carbon emissions. It is a profound social and economic transformation. It is about building a new world, a world of clean energy that is sustainable, equitable, and just for all. Yet as we race to deploy solar panels and wind turbines, a critical question looms. Who is driving this revolution and who is being left behind? This reality is that women, who are often the primary managers of household energy and the most vulnerable to energy poverty, face immense challenges in accessing the finance needed to be leaders in this transition. They are not just end users. They are entrepreneurs, innovators, and agents of change. Today, with the insights of Dr. Yazini April, we will explore not just the challenges, but the solutions We will move from conversation to concrete action, examining how innovative financing models and parliamentary oversight can unlock the immense potential of women to lead us into a truly just and sustainable energy future. Let us all ensure that this transition is not just green, but gender just. The future of our planet and the prosperity of our communities depends on it. If I may introduce Dr. April, Dr. Funeka Yazini April's research expertise lies in industrialization with a focus on mining and specific economic zones, SEZs. She expanded her work from minerals into the energy industrial complex with a focus on issues such as value chains, economic clusters, manufacturing, and social inclusion. In 2022, she implemented a project on just energy transition from coal to renewables. The case of Eskom in Waterberg and Kangala districts, which is ongoing. In 2023, she headed a scoping exercise with a research team to Lefalale, Limpopo on coal and just energy transition. In 2022, she also led an NRF Global Dynamics of SA, Just Transition, from coal to hydrogen energy proposal, which culminated in a hydrogen conference, which was inclusive of the South African Parliament. Parliament was given a declaration for submission towards COP28. In 2019, she also headed a research team on economic transformation through the NDP project with a focus on agriculture and land reform, SME development, and community participation for the South Korean Embassy. I welcome Dr. April. Applause, please.
Good afternoon. I know it's about 4 o'clock and you've been here the whole day, I assume. Thank you very much. So I'll try and keep it short. I actually came with a PowerPoint, so please bear with me. I discovered that it's all paper, and I actually like paper presentations, but so I'll be skimming through it. So I'm delighted to be here, and I want to also thank the South African Parliament for inviting me, and also, and I'm very proud of our sisters at the Parliament for hosting this lovely event. I think it's a very, very significant, and I hope that it's a beginning of many more to come, because we need these discussions. Okay, let me get right to it. Let me see. I'm sorry, like I said, this is a PowerPoint presentation, so. So I was asked to discuss women and finance for a just energy transition. And the methodology basically is I'm going to talk about the background on just energy transition in South Africa to date. And I'm going to focus on one of South Africa's key areas, which is coal to hydrogen, and the issue of infrastructure to support women in this area, the challenges faced by women in securing energy finance, and innovating financing models, and the role of parliaments. These are the key areas I was told to discuss. I must say that most of the work I've done on JET has been from a general landscape, because there is not much research that has been done specifically on women. And even when we're contacted like by the World Bank and whatever, they will say, yes, we should make sure that it's inclusive. I mean, right now we have a project that we're going to be doing in Mpumalanga on socioeconomics. But when we met with them, there's nothing specifically focused on women and just energy transition. That's part of the challenges that this presentation has actually brought to me, that we actually need to change the narrative, even in the research most of your funders and international donors do, to ensure that there's specific focus on gender, because it tends to be missing in this. It's discussed as a wholesome outcome part of the package. But like when you go and do interviews, there is no specific slot where we'll specifically go and talk to women. And so this presentation today was really necessary for me because it helped me realize the challenge that we have. So South Africa's just energy transition. Let me, before I begin to talk about that, let me just explain that South Africa is the 7th producer of coal globally. Number 1 is China, number 2 is India, and then we are at number 7. And we contribute about 3.5% of the world's coal resources. And we are reliant on coal to generate 92% of electricity. And so it's a very, very critical sector to our country, which contributes about 2% of the country's GDP. And we also have had a number of SMEs, particularly women, who have had value change linkages, especially in because most of your coal mining communities, in fact, most of your mines are in your rural areas. Whether it's in Limpopo, you'll find them like in Burgersfort. So, and unlike, you have exceptions like in Gauteng, but a lot of them currently are, especially in regards to JET, they're in your rural areas. So most of your value chains or the SMEs that were involved in the coal sector, it's more at a small scale production where maybe they would provide assistance in catering, etc. So now, as we know, the COP26, that was where the Just Energy Transition Partnership was established with your EU countries, the US, then, before Trump was not present then. And you had your friends, and South Africa was the first country actually to sign up for Just Energy Transition. And so my discussion today will be on the impact of JET from coal to hydrogen, because that's what South Africa's, one of its key climate change objectives is to try and work on coal as a fossil fuel to reduce or deal with or promote decarbonization of coal and promote the use of hydrogen. And also, so the just part of it is to try and include your economic inclusivity, which would then also include your women. The International Labour Organization defines just energy transition as greening the economy in a way that is fair and inclusive and as much as possible for everyone involved, and that no one is left behind. Policy-wise, JET in regards to coal to green is driven by South Africa's JET framework, by the Presidential Climate Change Commission and the Department of Science and Innovation Hydrogen Society Roadmap. I'm not going to go into the discussion of the production of it, but let me just go straight to South Africa's process in terms of this decarbonization method. Like I said, JET from coal to hydrogen is one of the key areas South Africa has actually selected as this decarbonization tool. However, for South Africa, this JET process is complicated because of our legacies of apartheid, the spatial economics that are involved, poverty, unemployment, and including challenges with the energy sector, etc. And also the perceptions on just energy transition is something that there has to be more understanding of it on the ground. And also, when you look at the role of women globally involved in renewable energy, it's only about 32% globally. So it's just something that we need to work on. Then the other thing that I also highlight in terms of just energy transition challenges is that currently JET is so focused on your coal miner redirection. What's going to happen to the coal miners? What will happen to the coal miners? What will happen to the coal miners? There's not much said about the SMMEs that were linked to that coal mining industry. It tends to be left out, especially when you look at places like in Mpumalanga, where you had your energy plants plus your coal plants. So now you had a lot of female SMEs in those sectors, but there's not much redirection there. I read an article where the president talked about trying to include the women, but the strategy is something that I've not also gotten clarity on how that will be applied. And I want to indicate that South Africa is not an exception. India is one of the largest producers of coal. As I said, it is number 2. China is also struggling with the issue of just energy transition. China's case is interesting. China is the world producer of hydrogen energy, is the world producer of solar. So from an industrial point, China is doing very well. But from a just energy transition perspective, they have their own. I read they have very interesting case studies, and it's trying to, because in China their main focus actually is specifically the coal miners, unlike here in South Africa where it's like it has to be inclusive to a broader sector. In China is very clear and specific. But based on their studies, most of the people that were redirected from coal mining ended up going back to it in maybe in another province because they felt that the money that they were making was just not enough in the new careers they had been redirected to, which is something that we discovered when we went to Lephalale. It's a coal mining town, and it's the main mining town there is called Exaro. And when we talked to the people there, they were like, you know, we grew up knowing Exaro. We are Exaro. Exaro is us. There's the solar plant there, but they only hire about 3,000 people. Now, but the Exaro mine, it hires like 6,000 to 7,000, and this is what we grew up on. So there are also those aspects, and that was what was also playing out in China. Brazil, I would say, is one of your best. I'm actually very impressed with how Brazil's case is different. They didn't start off with just energy transition. They started off saying energy transition, and they started this about 30 years ago. So their country is run on about 80% renewable energy, and they have done very, very well. I mean, I'm really impressed on how they have handled the process. There's still a challenge with integrating the women, but there are some processes. But going back to India, India is very coal dependent, just like South Africa. And it has also adopted the process of JET to hydrogen. However, India and China are the two countries that told the West during this process that, listen, we're not going to do what South Africa did. We're going to transition in our own way. In fact, the word transition is not going to apply too much to us. They made their rules, and South Africa kind of changed about 2 years after it had signed the agreements to say, no, we're also now going to do this according to what suits South Africa, because at the end of the day, the economy still does depend on coal, and you have to be practical about that. Now, India is an interesting case study because, in terms of today's discussion, because it is dominated, the coal mining industry is about 40% women. And I'm not talking about the women that are like your engineers. I'm talking about your regular women who are at the grassroots. They are the ones that are working the mines. They're doing a lot of the blasting. They're doing, and if some of them even start from childhood in some of the coal mining regions. So there's a strong affinity to coal, and they're very, very energy dependent in some of these communities. So I find India's case a very good place to look at in terms of the issue of women integration. What will happen to these women who have survived on the coal industry all these years to now? Because when you talk about coal miners being redirected, it's quite simple. You're talking about your rock drillers, blah, blah, blah. But so now what's going to happen to all these women who have been living in these communities? And you should see them, you know, it's unfortunate I cannot show my PowerPoint because I actually pictures of them where you could see them carrying these bags of coal, heavy bags of coal that they carry when they are done. So this is like their livelihood in some of the parts of India. And one thing I also liked about India is their activity. Their civil societies, their women's civil societies, they are very strong, especially when it comes to this issue of coal production. They have been very, very vocal. However, despite all of that, the Indian women still face significant challenges in shifting from, in terms of being included with the whole shift, and also being included in the changes, especially in terms of redirection, because like I said, most of those women are at the grassroots level. So most of them are not educated, and it's difficult to transition them to another career just like that. So that's another challenge, and we can relate their story to some of the women that are in Mpumalanga, but in South Africa. But the difference with the women in Mpumalanga in South Africa is that a lot of them, those that work in the mines, are actually, are not at, the ones in India are totally not even at any particular level. These are just your typical grassroots. So, but I think we could learn a lot from that, especially from a South Africa perspective. And one other thing that I like about India is their department. Or before I even go there, because I'm going through a PowerPoint here, the India case is also complicated because in India, I don't know, you know, they have a lot of issues. I mean, well, we talk about land issues in South Africa. There is complex, especially for women. They don't have rights. If their husband dies, they don't have the right to the land and all those things. So it all plays into all of that aspect. The tribal aspects and how women are just looked at in general. Then there's the caste system. There's so many factors. So the issue of finance in countries like India is complicated for women, because you have to also understand that funders, when they're going to talk about financing, they want to see how much money they're going to make in capacitating. It's not a charity thing of we're going to skill women so they become better. It's about business also. So the issue of capacitation, what is the likelihood that those women will be able to be competitive in this industry if we invest in them or fund them? Now, again with India, what was interesting is, I even Googled and did some research on their department. And I'm going to compare that with South Africa. In South Africa, we have the Department of SMMEs. But what I found in South Africa, for example, I read something where the Department of Trade and Industry was pushing for South African SMMEs to become involved in the the African Free Trade Agreement value chain process. But now there were requirements that, for example, you have to have about 15 million in your account. Now, what about those SMMEs that don't have 15 million and maybe have 5 million and are doing very well, actually? So I'm just and this is what I like about the India approach. The India approach, they are more into your mini, more SMMEs. They don't have this 15 million requirement. It's like you're an SMME, you see, you've been working the past years, blah, 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 and they actually go way out to try and reach these women, which is another thing that I like. Because when I read that AFCTCA thing from our government, it was like you have to go on the Brand SA website to get information. So how about those women that don't have access to that? So for JET to work, when we talk about funding and all these things, I would say that, and it's not just South Africa. India, like I said, has the same challenge with South Africa. Brazil also, there's a little bit of that. So we need to find a way to really go at the grassroots level. I don't think we're doing a very good job in terms of India, South Africa, and Brazil. And I think we could really do better. China does better also there. Okay, now let me go on to the financial part of it. The financial inclusion aspect. I say that it's a challenge because there is a financial architecture in the global system in terms of deploying JET funds. And I explained that even with our research that we do, whether it's, well, okay, I have to give the European Union credit. We just filled out a proposal for them for an equity study where they strongly emphasize that we have to bring in the women civil society groups, which was like a wow. So, but usually the architecture is designed, project financing is very exclusionary, like I said earlier, and it's really designed, most of the funding right now is more for the formal economy. It's for your big industries, your huge industries. And in fact, let me just say that the just energy transition right now, the main beneficiaries of it are going to be your huge industries. That's where we are now. And again, and I said China is the same problem. They are more industrial with that approach than really about the inclusivity of it. So, and then also I mentioned the issue of that we tend to exclude by placing these rules, like if you know, because I know a lot of women that do solar, and it's, you know, and some of them are engineers and they're good, and I see the work they've done, but the problem for them is the exclusion, and they cannot go. But some of them I know now are struggling. And it's really sad to see that. So, and again, so we have to find a way to make sure that we are more inclusive and draw more of the women, and especially the women also, and this is why, again, I like the India case of the micro. They also include your informal workers, your informal entrepreneurs. And so we need to include that. When we talk about SMMEs in South Africa, we need to include your informal workers to some degree to qualify for certain things, especially when we talk about just energy transition for finance and all that. In places like Komati, most of the women there were involved in the informal sector when it came to that industry of coal. Let me just say that Mpumalanga, there's a province called Mpumalanga in South Africa. Mpumalanga has become like your reference point globally in terms of just energy transition. Mpumalanga is where your World Bank has invested millions to see that process through. In fact, it became your just energy transition case study. But now, and so they decided to shut that. They have our energy plants there for electricity in the country, I think about 12. So they decided to shut down the Komati coal one, which is also a coal mining community, in 2022, because the plant was about 60 years. And so now, but the thing about this is that despite the billions of funding, I'm talking, I mean, there was a time when I got a call from one JET researcher here in Cape Town. She's like, hey, the German Ministry of Ministry of what was is coming with millions, it's coming with millions. Can you come join us? We're going to this meeting. Everyone is going to drive to Mpumalanga also, blah, blah, blah. And I couldn't go, but, you know, so Mpumalanga was, and it still is like this place. But despite all of that, when they implemented the transitional process, it didn't come through successfully. And again, it comes to this issue of lack of, when you also talk about exclusivity, and I spoke about the putting of the Africa Free Trade Agreement value chain information on the brand essay. Now, someone who is in Mpumalanga, who has an SMME there, is not going to look on that website and get that information. So what happened with Mpumalanga was that many people did not go on the ground. Unlike in India, their strategy of going on the ground is actually their model is quite interesting. They really managed to reach every nook and cranny. So they didn't do this. So a lot of the people were not skilled and trained. So when the coal plants were shut down and the ESCOM plants, the energy plants was shut down, there were these people, it was about 48,000 jobs that essentially from the PowerPoints that were lost due to the lack of sufficient planning, which was due to lack of clear information that should have gone down on the ground. And so money is not everything also in this whole thing. I know that there's been millions that have been put into this sector. So I just want to say money won't fix it. What will fix it is inclusivity, but at a serious grassroots level from the bottom up, not from the top down. And you know, I have to say, I wrote a policy brief on Brazil, and in that article, I compared it with South Africa. But I got to regret later, I realized I was hard on my country. Because actually what I realized is that some of these institutions like the World Bank, and I'm not going down against them, but they also we tend to just focus on what has South Africa done, what has South Africa done. But we don't realize that South Africa, especially since there's a partnership, it's a JETP, that we don't look to see the role of the partners in this process, because what really happened, I mean, the World Bank played a major delay process in terms of the implementation of the funding that would have led to the training. And we don't talk about that. We just say, look at the government, look at the government. So there's another issue that we really need to look at the policies that the EU and other countries have placed and to see, do they align with our countries this side to ensure, because our situations in Mpumalanga will not be the same as a place in Brussels. They're going to be different. So we have to look at that before we quickly cast aspersions also in terms of this process, especially for countries like South Africa or Brazil or China, etc., your global South countries. Then let me just quickly, I know that I said 15 minutes, I'm trying to, so you just tell me when I should stop. Okay. So then the other problem that I have is when we talk about reskilling of individuals, coal miners, and I'll give an example with my challenge with the issue of reskilling. I went to Limpopo at Burgers Fort. I was going to look at them. It's a place with about 28 mines, ferrochrome. South Africa produces 78% of the world's ferrochrome, which is used to make steel, your cell phones, your pots, your ever. But we actually buy steel back, but anyway. Here's the thing. there were mines there when I went to the local economic development office to say, what's your partnerships with the mines, blah, blah, blah. Then they'll say, no, we are training with the mining companies, we're training businesses and lots of women how to be part of the industry. That I'm like, okay, how long is this training? It's 2 years. Okay, that's wonderful. But now, the list that graduated, can I get this first list, and can you just tell me what are they doing now? Most of those people, not even one was like involved in the value chain for mining. And I'm seeing the same, which is a problem that China was also addressing. And I'm seeing that same problem with South Africa, because when you look at the value chains for hydrogen, it's your design, construction, like in solar, it's your transport and your entrepreneurship in local distribution networks, etc. But I'm not seeing training for coal mining redirection or capacity building for women in these areas so that they can do this. And I want to say again, this applies also to India, etc. I'm not seeing that part being done. So we have to ask, because when you're going to talk about financing, you have to talk about the training and the capacitation of that for the financing to become productive for the funder. And that is the main challenge that I see in terms of financing, that the training that we speak about is not really happening. Okay, I will wrap it up. I'm not going to go into the infrastructure, and I think I spoke about the LED. So I will, let me just conclude. I'm not going to go too much into the finance part then. I'm just going to conclude by talking about Parliament, to just say that I think the South African Parliament has played an indispensable role in ensuring inclusion and equity and transparency in the JET, in the energy process in South Africa, because effective oversight is key. We have to really monitor this process because there's a lot of money, billions involved in this industry. And the Parliamentary Budget Office in South Africa, I have to say, I like the fact that they have stressed the importance of embedding gender and redistribution as a core element of the nation's fiscal strategy. It will be great if, definitely, because it would really assist for your local communities. And they also recommended that South Africa leverages at the G20, 25, through the presidency, the requirement for G20 members to produce annual publicly accessible gender budget statements with disaggregated data on spending and outcomes related to gender equity. And I think it's a wonderful thing, not just for South Africa, but international, because I'll reiterate again, this is not a South Africa problem at all. And I also want to commend the Portfolio Committee on Women and Youth and Persons with Disabilities, because they've actually gone to visit some of these places like in Mpumalanga, and I think they need to be empowered in doing more in following up what is happening there. So let me just stop there. I will not go into the rest of the recommendations because they are too complex. So I want to say thank you for listening to me. I know that you're probably tired at this time of the day, and I appreciate your patience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for the presentation. I think from the background up until the conclusion, the solutions were outlined and the possible solution thereof for different countries. And what was important in this presentation it was trying to give us a picture of G20 member states as to where we are standing in this subject matter, of which is assisting us a great deal. we are going to open for questions of clarities. However, in this session, what we are going to request from honorable members are questions of clarities going in the direction of solutions. Because we cannot be sitting here and asking questions to ourselves. Instead, we have to provide solutions so that as and when we move out of this summit, we go and implement in our different countries individually and as a collective G20 member states. I will then be observing hands that will be asking questions of clarities that are also inputs and solutions to our problems. First hand, Honorable Manani, so Mam Dujwa, second, Honorable Member, and with the red dress, and Honorable Member with the pink shirt. Those are the 4 hands that I'm seeing. Honorable Maneniso?
Okay.
Honorable Member Teki, the 5th hand.
All right.
China, 6th hand.
Thank you, co-chairs. And let me start by appreciating the presentation by the doctor and say that, you know, it was a just-in-time presentation because we know that there's nothing that we can do without speaking about the JAT. So one would want to acknowledge the fact that at least as South Africa, we can acknowledge that we come a long way and we are not that far to actually do the best and be where we're supposed to be. And she has related on how we can learn from India in terms of bringing those who are disadvantaged, marginalized, and vulnerable. So I think one would want to suggest to the doctor through the multi-party caucus, Mema Dunja, that she needs to be invited to our multi-party caucus because at times we deliberate on issues, social issues like your health, education, but we have never get to that point of having this deep discussion of JAT. So the solution, as you said, that we need to bring inputs for way forward. One would say that the multi-party caucus must actually invite the doctor to come and share with us those best practice of bringing people that we think that we are representing and we don't want to leave them behind. And Honorable Dlamini, what is nice about what she has raised, of which I know that it's one of the issues as well on the side of youth, is the fact that most of development programs or empowerment programs, they don't have exit opportunities. So it actually gives us an opportunity as members of parliament, as legislatures, to say when we come with policies or programs, let us make sure that those programs, they speak to the whole value chain up until a person can be sustainable or established as an individual. So I want to appreciate the level of how she actually made the presentation so simple that one can understand what is her role in terms of advocacy on policy shift on such issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Second on the row.
No, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon. And thank you to Doctor on such a powerful presentation. The only thing that the research is silent on is the impact of coal mining in health, both women and young girls. And in us going to invite her, we will request that because that is to me, is quite very important because he said they start at an early age to be drillers in mind, and obviously that is to affect their health in one way or another. That is very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Mama. The third speaker.
Nusrat Ghani from the United Kingdom. I wanted to offer some of the solutions that we are deploying in the UK to offer a just transition, which for us isn't just an economic but also a strategic necessity. The UK has set ambitious targets to achieve net zero by 2050 and delivering a clean power system by 2030. This will require £40 billion of investment annually and the creation of 40 million new jobs globally in the energy sector. Yet, women currently hold less than a quarter of the jobs in the UK energy sector and in leadership roles. The numbers are even lower. Just 16% of executive directors and 8% of CEOs in major UK energy companies are women. So this is not just a diversity issue, it's a performance issue. Research shows that companies with more women in leadership roles are 60% more likely to reduce energy intensity emissions. And if we want a transition that is fast, fair and effective, women must be at the table, not as an afterthought, but as decision makers and innovators. Despite progress, barriers remain. We heard about that earlier on from the two fantastic presentations. Women entrepreneurs in clean energy face limited access to finance, that was reflected on earlier, rigid eligibility criteria and a lack of networks. In the UK, the gender gap in STEM education and green skills persists, threatening to leave women behind in the fastest growing sectors of our economy. If we fail to address these gaps, the benefits of the energy transition, jobs, investment and influence will bypass half the population. So the UK is taking steps. Our International Climate Change Finance Programme now embeds gender equality, disability and social inclusion standards across all projects, ensuring that climate finance is gender responsive and inclusive. Initiatives like Powerful Women are pushing for 40% female representation in leadership by 2030, and major energy employers are signing up to this pledge. But we can go further. Imagine if every green bond, every just energy transition partnership and every UK-supported climate fund included gender criteria from the outset. Imagine if women-led enterprises had equal access to capital through blended finance and guarantee schemes. This is not hypothetical, it is achievable, and as we've been shown today, it is absolutely urgent. A just energy transition without women is not just incomplete, it is impossible, and we do have strategies in place, we just need to deploy them. And if I may, I'd like to pass on to my co-deputy speaker, Baroness Gull.
Thank you very much for that insightful intervention highlighting key challenges and success.
Thank you.
Next.
Thank you very much. I'm Deborah Bull from the House of Lords in the UK. I want to make a comment, and perhaps it is a suggestion about education, because for women to be able to participate in the energy transition, there has to be equal access to education and skills development for women and girls. And specifically, we need girls not just to be literate, but to be numerate. And we celebrate the progress we've made in literacy. In fact, girls now outperform boys in reading across all education levels and in country income groups. But large-scale international studies have shown that boys still outperform the girls in maths. And the outcome of this is that in G20 countries, the proportion of women who work in science, engineering, technology, and mathematics has plateaued at 22%, and it's been at that level since 2005. And in OECD countries, fewer than 5% of girls contemplate a career in engineering or computing. These gender discrepancies are global. They're all over the world, and they are holding women back. They're reducing their aspirations and their career choices. Research shows there is no innate or biological component to this gender gap in mathematics ability. It is purely cultural, and it points to how much culture matters and how much we still continue to push girls one way and boys the other. In some countries, and my own is included, it's compounded by a societal acceptance that being bad at maths is normal. People are happy to say, oh, I'm terrible at maths. We would never say, I'm terrible at reading. So we need to change culture, and changing culture is really hard, but we as women with a seat at the table, we have the opportunity to do that. We need to raise awareness of low numeracy, we need to campaign for change, and we need to work to inspire young women to believe that they can have careers in the STEM subjects, in finance and in the economy. change is happening in the UK. We now have our first ever female Chancellor of the Exchequer in Rachel Reeves, but it's taken 800 years. I beg that it doesn't take today's young women quite so long to achieve their career aspirations in careers that involve numeracy and mathematics.
Thank you for your comment and suggestions. I'm given to understand we are left with two more interveners. Turkey.
Thank you for giving this opportunity. We believe that women's participation in energy investment and projects, particularly in leadership positions, should be encouraged. But how? Do you have some practical suggestion for the parliaments, especially? And I would like to share some experience of my country. As Turkey, we remained committed to strengthening the role of women in the technology sector. Within this scope, we supported women entrepreneurs in the field of clean technology and rewarded innovative business ideas in collaboration with the Ministry of Industry and Technology. To increase female employment and strengthen their representation in the energy sector, we signed the Women's Energy School Cooperation Protocol as a result of our collaboration with the private sector. We organized Energy School for Women training programs. We launched the Turkey's Female Engineers Project, which provides female engineering students with scholarship, internship, employment, and educational opportunities. In addition, we provided training and mentoring support to women entrepreneurs within the framework of the investment readiness and the globalization for women entrepreneurs in the clean technology sector module with the Scientific and Technology Research Council of Turkey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member from Turkey. Honorable Member from China.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to add two perspectives. One is about China's relying on coal energy. Yes, in the past, China has been relying on coal energy heavily. We identified it as a problem, so we've taken actions. If you see the energy structure of China, you will notice that coal, in the whole energy map, the percentage is declining dramatically. I can provide you with the latest information that by July this year, the electricity generated by non-fossil energy accounts for 60.8%. And for the added electricity installed power capacity last year, non-fossil energy account for 87.3%. So this is the trend of China's energy structure. We are doing what we can, and we have achieved our positive result. That is one perspective I would like to add. Another one is from women's perspective. I would like to share some information about China's effort to empower women to address climate change. I happen to have some information, so I would like to share with you. China has consistently organized the training program on South-South cooperation for climate change response, implementing a gender-balanced enrollment policy so women can have more advantage in these programs. Since 2022, nearly 300 female officials, experts, and scholars from developing countries engaged in climate change projects have participated in training programs in China. From 2012 to 2024, China conducted nearly 100 foreign aid training projects in meteorological monitoring, forecasting, and services, with women accounting for 36.72% of the trainees. It has donated 5,000 household solar PV power generation systems and 10,000 clean cooking stoves to Myanmar, reducing indoor air pollution and its associated health risks while supporting the country's low-carbon transition. The Lantang Mekong Cooperation Special Fund supported Cambodia in implementing a project on gender mainstreaming in climate action, enhancing rural women's climate adaptability and resilience. This is just some of China's effort, and women all over the world are welcome to join our projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the perspective and insights from China. So for sure, the core argument is that there is a low participation of women in the energy sector at approximately between 20 to 32%, Dr. April, and it is a major challenge that must be addressed. So if we may continue with the comments, suggestions, and questions from the participants today, but if we could limit our intervention to maybe 2 to 3 minutes per intervener, please. So if I may assist, based on Dr. April's research at the Global South-North Center, there are primary systemic barriers that prevent regular women at the grassroots level, she explained, in the Global South from accessing energy finance. And I would wish for contribution from interveners on how they think these challenges are for their particular country. Are they more of a cultural nature, economic nature, institutional in nature, or probably health-related, or depending on the aspirations of women themselves, those who are concerned? Hands up. Nobody's sleeping. Yes, madam.
Thank you. I'm Sarah, speaker from Namibia. I wanted to maybe make one comment on the previous aspect that we were discussing about the just transition before I come to the issue of the constraint to accessing financing for women to finance their green energy initiative. I wanted to say that just as it is important to ensure that women are not left behind by way of providing them with support as we ensure the just transition to clean energy, we also need to ensure that countries that are most affected by climate change, such as Namibia, but may not qualify as vulnerable because of the per capita income, also receive similar consideration. Namibia is actually considered to be one of the most affected countries by climate change. But because of the per capita income, we do struggle to get assistance to deal with emergencies that are related to climate change. And that would mean that interventions that assist communities, impoverished communities, are also suffering because they have to rely on government's own funding and do not benefit from international funding. That is one. So number two, I would like to say that one of the reasons why women would struggle to get access to financing is because they usually do not have the means to provide security for the funding that they want to raise. And many of them are also not educated to be able to write business plans that would inspire the conventional financial institutions to advance lending to them. But good enough, many of them have organized themselves in financing cooperatives in Namibia, for example, and we have seen that in certain sectors they have become some of the leading participants. In the housing sector, for example, they produce the most low-cost houses that is helping to transform our informal sector, where poor communities live in shacks and they are able to save together and buy land and provide credit to their members to also build their houses. So I believe that what can be done is to train the women, but also to support the capital market development initiatives of countries like Namibia that do have some formal capital markets, but they are not deepened enough, and there is no adequate capacity to enable the financial markets to actually deploy this funding. So what we have in Namibia, for example, is our funding come to Big Brother down south, who is South Africa, because there is bigger capacity there to be able to assess more complex projects and deploy this capital in South Africa. So if we can look at that aspect of ensuring that countries are actually assisted to transition in their communities by making sure that they don't bear disproportionately the cost of that, and there are alternative ways for them to rely on other than the non-climate friendly energy generation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. It's clear from our discussion that the future of energy is not just about volts and amps, but also about bold decisions and empowering voices. So on that note, I think we can all agree that when it comes to a just energy transition, we cannot afford to be powerless in our efforts. So from your country's perspective, how can G20 member nations collectively address maybe the data gap regarding gender disaggregated finance data in the energy sector? I welcome intervention from the honourable members. No? No solution at all? So I think we are responsible for fostering partnerships, ensuring effective oversight and promoting inclusion and gender integration through our roles as parliamentarians in budget allocation and policy. If I may hand the mic to my co-chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Co-Chair. I think the one item that needs Doctor to comment on is from Mam Notuchwa, when she indicated that she did not hear the other party that talked to the mining sector and so forth, the involvement of men there. Maybe you can come and address that part, but other than that, all the comments were input, not necessarily questions that need answers. She will come again and repeat it for you, so that you can respond to it. You may come to the stage. Ma'am Tujwa, whilst she's coming to the stage, you may repeat your comment again.
Madam Chair, the question was the impact of coal mining, women's health, right across in all the countries that he has referred to. The research is a bit silent on that.
Needless to say, when in India, the impact is very high. The health issues are quite high for the women there, because like I said, some of them especially in those mining villages like Andista, Andavi, or I can't say the name properly, but it's a problem. South Africa does not have that issue of young people starting at that level of India does. The health issue is more in South Africa for your mine workers, the ones who are in the mines, your rock drillers, blah, blah, blah. But the health, if you go to Lephalale in Limpopo, when you go in, you can see the air. You can see the pollution from the coal mining Exaro. So we asked when we were there if a study had been done to see how much impact the coal mining has on the community. We wanted to actually meet with the Department of Health, but they didn't meet with us. So, and I'm going to Mpumalanga next 2 weeks. And I'm also be curious to find out if the air is like there in Lephalale. But suffice to say that I wouldn't say from a South African side, I have to give us credit. What is it? The Mining Health Council. Is it? The Mining Health Council does a very good job there. And they do excellent research on that area. So I don't even waste there are folks there that just do that. So there's lots of data. And I have to say South Africa is doing well there. We're doing very well when it comes to the health and to the research. But I'm not sure that we focus more on the mine workers. We neglect the actual communities living in those mining communities affected by the pollution. That's what we fail to do.
Thank you, Doc. It also says that we need to go deeper into this aspect as different countries, South Africa included, so that as and when we continue with our journey of just transition energy, we are able to pick up these issues and address them immediately. This brings us to the end of our session. Unfortunately, we will not have a rapporteur for this session. We were able to rapporteur ourselves as delegates, and let us give ourselves a round of applause. I will then call Honorable Nodada to make a closing remarks for us. After that, we will then hand over the session back to Madam Deputy Speaker to give us announcements if there are any and release us. From myself and the co-chair, thank you very much for being the good audience from this morning up until now. We have done a great job as women and men who have joined us and assisted us and supported us up until this hour of the day. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Let me greet all honorable chairpersons of the sessions today, Honorable Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, honorable speakers from all legislatures and globally, chairperson of the Multi-Party Women's South Africa's 2025 P20 Women Parliamentarians is held to address pre-existing gender inequalities, placing women, girls, and people with disabilities in the center of empowerment and development. Under the theme Women Parliamentarians for Global Solidarity, Equality and Sustainability, meaning this is an important platform for us to take stock and benchmark the best practices. Though we are still far from addressing these inequalities, but it is quite exciting to hear from the presenters here today that there is work which has been started to address. The clarion call is that now is the time for action to liberate women from all forms of oppression. Many presenters have called for the inclusion, equality, and parity for women as it is their constitutional right. I hope as we end this day, we will collectively address these challenges that were at the center of the discussions today. Access to quality education, unpaid labor practice, poverty and inequality, ensure protection and decent work, look at women underrepresentation, gender responsive budget, which is, I should think it is at the center, because nothing can be achieved without a gender responsive budget. Access to quality health care services, and lastly, addressing the risk of climate change. We all heard the Minister for Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities stressing the fact of centrality of women in all these issues we want to address. This can be done through partnership, collaboration, integrated action. Lastly, there is a call to strengthen monitoring and evaluation systems. And we must also thank the two doctors who presented here, especially Dr. Yazini, for taking us through the legislative framework on GET. Forward with women empowerment, forward. I thank you.
Honourable delegates, guests, thank you so much for your participation today. We have now reached the point where we can relax a bit. I just have one announcement to make, and that is the negotiators for Women and Youth outcome document will meet in the Orca Conference Centre in the building, and that will be immediately the moment we adjourn here. So if it's relevant to any of you, you will now be meeting at the Orca Conference Centre. It is in the building. It is where the Youth Summit was today. And with that, I wish you a wonderful evening. Enjoy it here in this part of the Cape, and we will reconvene tomorrow morning at 9. Thank you so much.